Hello, you 16,000 awakening wonders. Today we are talking about Russell Brand, and yes, that is how Russell Brand starts every one of his shows. So I wanted to do a natal chart reading using the new Astro Persona deck, and I was wondering who I should choose to do the reading on. A celebrity of some kind seemed the obvious choice. And I was thinking about this on Friday, and he came to mind right away. And, I tried to think about some other people, but I just had this sense that this would be the right person to talk about. And when I went to run his chart yesterday, which was November 4th, the day that Saturn went direct, I saw that another woman had come forward with allegations against him that he had sexually assaulted her. For those of you that don't know, since September, Brand has been dealing with accusations from women that he had assaulted and raped them. And there was some interesting things done to him based on that. Basically, pretty much right away, his YouTube channel, which has over 6 million viewers, was demonetized. I read as well that he owns a pub in England and that was closed down. So it was like they're trying to take away his livelihood, which is concerning. I mean, whether or not you think he's innocent or guilty, and I don't know whether he's innocent or guilty, we haven't even been presented with the evidence. He's being punished before he's even gone to trial, before anyone's seen the evidence, and he's been convicted of anything. And that is certainly, no way to have a balanced justice system. So, of course, he has this going on. And so he's in the collective consciousness at the minute, and that was probably what I was picking up on, was the fact that he's in the collective consciousness. And obviously a lot of people that, maybe the mainstream media would categorize as conspiracy theorists suspect that this as well is some kind of conspiracy against Russell Brand. Again, I'm not going to comment on that. I may pull some cards later just to ask some questions about that, but my intention is not to prove his guilt or his innocence, but more to go over his chart and what's in his chart. Another reason why I wanted to choose Russell Brand is because he's really gone through a major transformation. Now, obviously, this is the culmination of many transformations, but it really was not that long ago, probably a little over a decade ago, that he was a drug addict, a sex addict, and a little bit crazy. Personally, I did not like that old Russell Brand at all. I've never seen any one of his movies. He was wild, and uh, he now is, become much more spiritual. He's been finding himself, and that's a journey of many light workers. Many light workers have come from challenging past lives, difficult childhoods. They don't necessarily like being on Earth. They seek to escape Earth at times. They are they feel disconnected from the planet because they feel that humanity is very unjust. And yeah, that often leads to bad choices, bad behaviors, addictions. It's also a way of transmuting things. And then they turn this around and become more spiritual. Again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily Brand's journey, but certain things in his chart align with this kind of idea. So then it brings up the kind of question of, are people redeemable? What makes people redeemable? Because in the old days, and this is like him saying these things about himself, how wild he was and how he was lost in addictions and maybe not even that much of a nice or likable character. Should he be seen as someone that is always that person, or is he allowed to transform himself and become someone better? And how is that reflected in his chart? And how is that going to be reflected in this case? A lot of the accusations against him come from that time when he was a drug addict. Certainly I'm not trying to make excuses for him or to say that because he was on drugs, any of these things are excusable. Certainly not saying that at all. But he's not that person anymore. One would think. I mean, I don't know him personally. I can only go by this kind of theatrical presence that he has. But yeah, it's just an interesting question for me, and maybe that will give you guys something to think about as we talk about this. So let's tackle this reading. As I said, I'm going to use the Astro Persona deck. I think I'm also going to read some Sabian symbols here because he has some very interesting and powerful Sabian symbols in his chart. And I will also give my own kind of insight in addition to what is being shared on the Astro Persona. And we'll try not to make this video too long. So where I'm going to start is where I generally start with astrology readings, and that's with the North and South Node. I feel like that is a good place to start anchoring an analysis of the chart. Personally, I do feel that I am interested in evolutionary astrology the most, which is the journey of our soul. And so I talk a lot about past lives when I do astrology readings as part of our soul's journey, lessons, things that we're trying to overcome and to grow from. I don't know how much I'll talk about past lives here. I may touch on this a little bit, but it probably won't be too much of a focus. That brings up something else, though, that people ask me about, and that is, overcoming the chart. When we look at a chart, each planet, each aspect, they have like a positive and a negative. And some people are in the more negative. And then they can change and they can turn that aspect into a more positive. In fact, that's what we're here to do, to overcome the negative and to heal and to bring out those positive qualities. Again, a lot of light workers, I feel, go through this as part of that process. And I think that we can get a good idea of what that looks like through Russell's chart. So let's start with the South Node, which is at 0 degrees 53 minutes of Gemini in the 4th house of Cancer. So the Astro Persona for the sign. Now, when you're using the Astro Persona deck, you would draw 2 cards. You would draw a card for South Node in Gemini and South Node in the 4th house. So the Gemini card says, you are an adept communicator and master of the ego mind, with a drive to collect and organize vast amounts of information. All of this data, however, creates a revolving door of ever-changing perspectives, which can make you seem intellectually dishonest. Your life challenge is to allow your inner being to intuitively help you comprehend this information in an integrated, holistic manner so you can develop and maintain a more consistent and honest point of view in alignment with universal principles. So definitely when we have South Node in Gemini, there's a connection to the mind. And yes, vast amounts of information. If we are acting more from our South Node, then we're going to be someone that feels like they can never get enough information. They're very curious about life. They're always seeking, they're always learning. It can be hard for them to make a decision sometimes because they may never feel like they quite have enough information to make that decision. With Gemini 2, we have got this understanding of duality with the twins. And so the Gemini mind, it wants to understand both sides, but yet it's very mental in its processes. It doesn't want to really allow the intuition in very much. I like how the card says it creates a revolving door of ever-changing perspectives, which can make you seem intellectually dishonest. Because the Gemini mind can be here, be there, right? Like I said, it wants to understand duality and both sides of everything. And it has a hard time settling in on one thing. Hyperactivity is a word that comes up on several of the Astro Persona cards that relate to Russell Brand, and I think we can see that a little bit in his mannerism, and that was probably even more obvious before he started meditating. Hopefully the meditation has helped him. But yet we do also see that he's a very good communicator. Something that may come up with the South Node in Gemini is not trusting themselves, maybe trusting other people over themselves, getting lost in the details too, and not being able to see the big picture, which Kimberly touches on in this card because it's saying you have to comprehend this information in a holistic manner. So this energy has to be balanced with Russell's North Node that is in Sagittarius. So the North Node card is called Create New Beliefs. You gather vast amounts of information but lack a structured way to organize or understand it, making you feel confused about what you actually believe. Your life path is to encounter the things you can't understand until you are forced to abandon logic and broaden your beliefs about all that is. Exposure to information you can't understand pushes you to reorientate your beliefs and create new ones. So one of the objects of this nodal access is to take all that information and create a structured belief system out of it. The Sagittarian energy is about what we believe, what our philosophy is, and it's about striving to understand the nature of reality, to understand the nature of truth. I think that the talk show that he does has been something that has exposed him to information that has caused him to look at what it is he believes and maybe to reorientate himself to what he thought he knew and needing to then follow through by changing certain beliefs. The North Node is going to push him to go deeper into his intuition rather than worrying about knowledge. And it can be that the logical mind wants to focus on the material world, but then we get to a point where the material world is not enough to explain to us what the nature of truth and reality is. We have to go beyond knowledge. That is our intuition and getting in touch with our higher self. And Sagittarius is the sign that kind of represents the higher self. And of course, it's about a balance because we take in knowledge too, but we have to understand that knowledge is not the totality. So we can see this is definitely connected to his transformation because it's about not solely focusing on the logical mind, the egoic mind, but moving into higher states of consciousness. I feel that Russell has a lot of trauma in his chart, both from his childhood and from other lifetimes. And I feel like part of the trauma, the consequence of that was relying too much on the mind rather than the heart. And that's something that he was meant to transform in this lifetime. Sagittarius also wants freedom. That's certainly something that has always been of interest to him, I feel. And also wanting to communicate freely without censorship. Then we also have to look at the house placement, which, as I said, is the fourth house. South Node in the fourth house. Be your own authority. In past lives, you have mastered emotional independence by learning how to minimize your emotional expectations of others, and you are fully capable of meeting your emotional securities from within. Your present challenge is to integrate internal and external independence to become your own voice of authority. It's also important that you accept responsibility for your actions. In a practical sense, this means you will need to secure your position in the world at large by mastering societal structures on your own in order to accomplish something of import. So Cancer is the sign in the house, I should say the fourth house, because the fourth house is the house of Cancer. It's about family. You know, that's the typical thing that we think about when we think of Cancer. But the fourth house goes deeper, certainly connected to our emotions because it's ruled by the moon. But it also has to do with our patterns, especially the patterns that we bring in from other lifetimes. They're still active. When we come up against difficult circumstances, we have to develop coping mechanisms. Those coping mechanisms are contained within the fourth house, and those can be good and they can be bad. When we have the South Node in the fourth house, one of the things that we have to do is we have to look at the coping mechanisms we've developed and see what no longer suits us. One of those things is going to have to do with our emotional self. If we're too far in our South Node, the emotional self is going to have imbalances. Often when we have a South Node in the fourth house, we're like a perpetual kid. We have a hard time growing up. And we can see that in Russell Brand's early activities, personality. We can literally almost see him go from the South Node Cancer into learning to become his own authority, to be more responsible throughout his transformation over the last decade. But I feel like some of those things come from difficult past lives, like I said, where he was in survival mode. He's got these 4 planets in the second house, which is the house of Taurus in Aries. And I feel like for me, that is a signature of in a past life, he was in survival mode. And I feel he probably had to focus on himself because he was in survival mode. But then what happens with that energy is that pattern was staying with him and he couldn't get out of survival mode, right? He was stuck in this pattern of insecurity, not feeling safe, emotions being in control, perhaps having a difficult time taking responsibility for his actions. And we see that behavior in him in the past. There's likely to be relationship issues as well, again, which we see because he's challenged in his chart between what he desires in other people, which again I feel goes back to at some point being in survival mode where there was a lot of focus just on himself. And it could have been because he lost his whole family because of maybe war or natural disaster. And he was by himself. And if we think about a situation perhaps where we lose everything, lose our home, lose our family, and we're worried about where are we going to get food, where are we going to get water, where are we going to sleep tonight, well then that becomes a little bit easier to understand why some people tend to be more self-focused when they're coming into this lifetime. There's also a lot of emphasis put on the family. There's some kind of family karma, and it can be hard for a person with South Node in Cancer to let go of the family. They can be very dependent on the family and codependent in general. And Russell himself has said that he has struggled with codependency. Like the card is saying, South Node in Cancer needs to find their own inner authority in the sense that they need to feel secure within themselves. And he's got a couple challenging aspects here in his chart that I feel when he came into this life, he didn't have a lot of internal security. The fourth house also relates to soul group, soulmate, soul group. And I feel that Russell has taken on a big role within the soul group. Really, kind of any celebrity takes on a soul group role, but through his own personal spiritual transformation, I feel like he can be someone that's like a guiding force for other people within the soul group. And yeah, we might touch on that and some other things as we talk about the chart. But then going to the North Node in Capricorn, be your own hero. Inherently a sensitive soul, you were likely born into a difficult or abusive family, or had a pervasive feeling of not belonging. This wounding caused you to hide from yourself for protection. While North Node in Cancer rules the mother, South Node in Capricorn rules the father. This placement asks you to develop the father archetype to heal internal emotional wounds and overcome the negative character traits you developed to cope. Adopt discipline, determination, firm boundaries, and take responsibility for actions as you persevere through life's challenges. Yes, definitely. So his 10th house, North Node, is ruled by Saturn. That's connected to the father, to authority, to structure. And that's what a person with this placement needs to build in order to develop internal security and being able to come into that balanced emotional state. So, needing to find self-control, working on achieving goals, taking responsibility for your actions, being the adult instead of the perpetual child. And when I say that, it means like healing your inner child, taking your inner child hand, which is the South Node in the fourth house, and becoming the adult, the parent to the inner child, setting goals and achieving those goals. Through becoming the adult, that creates the opportunity for more personal freedom, which is what he's looking for. And it's possible that in other lifetimes, the family has limited his personal freedom, which would make sense with all his planets in Aries and also Pluto and Uranus in Libra. His nodal axis does run along his 10th house cusp or MC and his IC or 4th house cusp. This is family and public life, or I should say private life and public life. With North Node being on his 10th house cusp, this is a pretty good indicator that, he was destined to be famous. Someone with that placement is someone that's likely to become very well known. So now that we've touched on his nodes, let's go around his chart and talk about the other aspects. And we'll start with his ascendant or rising sign, which is in Capricorn at the 28th degree. Now, Capricorn is the same as his 10th house, where his North Node is. So the ascendant, if this is his right birth time, I'm going by, he did mention, I think in his book, that he was born around midnight, and I think that's what is being used according to online sources. So assuming this is right, this ascendant is going to help him come more fully into that Capricorn energy of needing to be responsible, which is the name of this card for the Capricorn rising. Let's look at some of the key words here. Deadpan humor, image conscious, leader, hardworking, excessive, obnoxious. Don't underestimate your potential to achieve anything you set your mind on doing, but clearing self-doubt and believing in your ability is the key to your success. So I do think that he has a lot of capabilities to be a leader that is blossoming through his transformation. Obviously, in the past, because of his addictions, he was not able to be a leader, but he's making quite a name for himself in that area now. Of course, he's a comedian. He does have that deadpan humor. Capricorns tend to have that sarcastic or dry wit. Achieving anything you set your mind to, but clearing self-doubt and believing in your ability is key to success. I definitely feel that is truth here in his chart. The ascendant relates to our physical body as well. So those that are born in Earth tend to have dark hair, darker complexions. Of course, it's not true across the board, but I'm generalizing. And of course, he fits that physical appearance of an Earth sign. So the Sabian for his ascendant is a woman reading tea leaves. Some of the key words are symbolism, opening pathways to the spiritual center, seeing the signs, intuition and clairvoyance, creative visualization, nonverbal clues, fathoming the depths of simple things, constantly seeking assurance, taking things literally, relying on superstition or esoteric advice. Remember, he needs to develop his intuition in this lifetime. I feel like symbolism is something that figures prominently in his personality. Now, obviously, I don't know him, but that's just something that I'm getting. In fact, I was noticing before actually the tattoos on his arms, and on one of his arms, he's got the symbols for the chakras, and then next to it, Jesus on the cross. So those right there are powerful symbols. So next, let's take a look at his moon. One of the interesting things is that Russell has had Pluto transiting his ascendant for a while, and Pluto will be moving away from his ascendant now, but when these accusations came up, Pluto was exact on his ascendant. And so it's been a time of major transformation for him. And it's possible that what is happening with these accusations is a part of his transformation. Sometimes what we don't realize is that things that come into our lives that are seemingly very negative are the things that actually really creates the transformation. We need to have challenges in our life. And so while this can be a very difficult time because these are very serious accusations and could lead to some kind of criminal conviction, but is also going to affect how people in the public view him. This could be like a massive impetus for change, and Pluto being on his ascendant, actually squaring a cross that he has in his chart, is likely to be what brings about this change. So his moon is in Aries at the 4th degree, open emotional expression, freely expresses feelings, takes it personally, nurturing, mood swings. While your emotional honesty and gentleness are refreshing, be mindful and aware that the feelings of others are just as important as your own. Yeah, I think like Moon and Aries, they can get caught up in their own wants and their desires sometimes and forget about the other person. Again, he's got that signature of another lifetime where he was very focused on himself. Aries is fire, and someone with an Aries moon. I think Aries moon people are pretty stable, but if you set them off, they can get um, that fire can come in and they can get very angry, but it usually burns out quickly. So they don't necessarily hold on to the negative feelings and the anger. Usually they can express that, unless obviously there's something in the chart that makes that expression difficult, and then they can clear it. He also has Mars, the ruler of Aries, conjunct his moon. So that can make the moon and the emotions and that fire energy even more volatile. The other aspect of his moon would be second house Taurus, emotionally attached to possessions, desires luxury, fears lack, craves admiration, slow to let go. You have a strong need for financial security and hate being in debt. Your spending habits swing from generous to impulsive to frugal. Well, going back to what I said about the moon in Taurus and this stellium that he has in Taurus being a sign that he likely had a past life where he was dealing with a lot of stress and the desire for survival. One of the things that I mentioned that often accompanies this is loss of material possessions. When we think of Taurus, we think of people that like to have their material things around them, that maybe become too attached to material things. They like to have luxury. And that can be because of these past lifetimes where they lost everything. And that made them feel very insecure. And so the desire now is to have a sense of security with their possessions. The trick is to not become too emotionally attached to them. With when we're talking about the moon, that is a possibility. Now, he said that he was very driven to be famous. Goes with his North Node placement. But I think with these second house planets, that wanting to have material success, financial success, is definitely part of what he craved. So maybe we could see in the past with his old self this attachment to possessions, but hopefully with his spiritual transformation, he's healing through that. Now, that doesn't mean that someone doesn't want to have nice things, and it's not a negative thing to want to live in a nice house and to have nice possessions. The problem is when we become so attached to it that it takes away from our spiritual growth and it puts us in that egoic mindset of finding our identity through our possessions. When we're looking at astrology, we often see a lot of dichotomy. And we see that in Brand's chart. On the one hand, he likely does have this desire for material wealth. And yet he said that he feels that wealth needs to be more equally distributed. Well, where is his line with that? Is he just talking about people that are wealthier than him? Or is he talking about himself? And is he willing to give up his own personal wealth to fulfill his ideal? That's something that we'll have to see what happens in the future. But all of us come in with these dichotomies, and on a soul level, that's what makes us work through all the energy. So next we're going to look at Mars, impulsive. Spontaneous, leader again, free spirit, fiery, insensitive, inconsiderate, hostile, competitive. New things turn you on, but you quickly lose interest, so you need excitement and drama to keep you motivated. Take care as you are accident prone. I think it's clear that he's dealt with impulsivity issues. Mars in the second house, overly protective, elegant, superficial, impulse buyer, sex appeal, imposes their will on others, possessive, materialistic, stubborn. It's a good thing your hard work and luck with money pays off because you like to have nice things. Take care not to be too possessive of things or people. I think this card touches on something here that's important, which is possessiveness can take the form of being possessive with people. Now he's got these 3 planets here, Moon, Mars, Jupiter. Remember, Jupiter kind of expands what it touches. Mars in Aries is already, as we've said, impulsive, focused on its own needs, especially with this conjunction to the moon. And then this all opposes Pluto. This definitely speaks about sexual addictions, could be sexual kinks, having secrets around sex, using sex to feel nurtured, wanting to feel grandiose, being very self-centered. And it's negative. It could be wanting to have a lot of power. That could be something that he's dealt with in other lifetimes, is having a lot of power. I think his chart really speaks to that. In this lifetime, learning not to abuse that power, but focusing more on justice and being a champion of the underdog. So let's talk about Sabians here. The Sabian for his moon is a white triangle is seen. It has golden wings. Inspiration and zeal, feeling elevated and inspired through spiritual or creative energy. Flying to a greater perspective. Angelic forms, creative imagination, self-transcendent, finding new dimensions of experience. Visions, ascension, ascended beings, escapism, forgetting about the requirements of the body, being ungrounded, things that aren't based in reality. This Sabian is a fairly spiritual Sabian, and I think it's a nice place to have his moon because I think it speaks to being able to transcend from the egoic subconscious mind into a higher state of consciousness. His Mars is on the president of the republic or the ruler of one's country. Inner power, willpower, discipline, integrity, discipline of thoughts, emotions, and action. Leadership, calling the shots, taking charge, the democratic process. Negatives are taking control, lording it over everyone, being overbearing, egotistical, and self-centered. Again, we see that there's an opportunity here with his Mars. There's, yes, the ego way, which is being very self-centered, being overbearing, being obnoxious, wanting to control other people. And then there's this higher vibration, which is having inner strength, being very disciplined. Could this be an indication that he could even hold political office at some point? That's a possibility. Jupiter, exuberant, ambitious, altruistic, sociable, overindulgent, critical, brutally honest, self-focused, stubborn. You love to share your abundant good vibes or to help others. Think twice before offering it to those who don't want it or trying to fix things that aren't broken. Well, I think it's safe to say that he does have an exuberant personality. And maybe in the past that came out in some negative ways. But I think he's learned to use this exuberance to his advantage. One of the things that I like about him now is his ability to take information that sometimes seems heavy or really frustrating, and when he talks about it, he makes jokes about it and he gets people to laugh about it, and that can transform some of the anger and frustration that people can feel when they hear about things that are hidden from us or that maybe political figures are trying to hide from us. And that's a great quality to have, and that's a great quality for a leader to have. So, Jupiter in the second house, prosperous, optimistic, rich, generous, poetic, business minded, materialistic, treats enemies ruthlessly. Your driving need is to have luxurious comfort and to make people happy. You spare no expense on creature comforts, so it's fortunate you have the Midas touch. Yeah. Like all these second house Taurus placements are going to have a lot to do with prosperity and wealth and the possibility of materialism, which we've talked about materialism being the lower quality of the sign. The higher quality is being generous. Having Jupiter in the second house is a good placement because that's a pretty good indication that you're going to have a life where you don't have a lot of struggle with finances. And that may not have always been true for him, especially when he was in addiction. And I don't know what his childhood was like, but he's been able to turn that around now. We don't have a card for Chiron, but I want to read the Sabian symbol. Through imagination, a lost opportunity is regained. So, keywords here: creative imagination and visualization, hopes renewed when all seems lost, second chances, last minute reprieves, judging things to be positive when once they were thought to be negative, being exonerated or forgiven, pardons giving release, changing your mind, therefore changing the outcome. Cautions are relying on self-pity, not noticing solutions to problems, going over and over lost opportunities. So this is an interesting one because it talks about this being pardoned, getting a second chance. In a way, he's already had a second chance because, well, he wasn't such a great person before, let's be honest. And there's probably a lot of people that were like me that didn't think that highly of him or didn't like him that much and just thought he kind of acted like an egotistical, self-centered jerk. And he has changed people's opinions of himself in a lot of ways. And now we have these accusations, and we have to wonder if these accusations are going to have him being exonerated. Is he going to be pardoned, or is he going to be convicted? His Chiron placement is pretty integral to his chart because he has this cross, which is Chiron opposing Uranus and his ascendant opposing Venus, and that makes a cardinal cross. When things transit this cardinal cross, that's when important things are going to happen to him. And when these accusations came out, I mentioned how Pluto was on his ascendant, but also the North Node was conjunct his Chiron. And I think that's going to be key. But remember, we're talking about the North Node, which is the direction for his life. Couple that with the Sabian of his Chiron, and I think there's a possibility that he could be exonerated somehow. if not exonerated, I feel like he might be forgiven. And we see this with celebrities. There's a lot of celebrities out there that behave very badly. Let's face it, they get exonerated, or they don't really have to face much consequence for their action. And I'm not here to judge. I'm not to say what's right or wrong. I'm not even here to say if it's fair. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but the aspects to this cross are going to be what we need to watch. This cross also speaks to a lot of wounding that he's been carrying on a soul level across many lifetimes. I think we'll get more into this when we get to his Venus. Sun in Gemini, communication, intellectual, desires change of scenery, endless curiosity, adaptable, capable, hyperactive, has to be in the know. Competency, communication, and understanding are highly important to you, but take care not to come across as a know-it-all to others. So remember I said earlier that several cards had hyperactivity, has keywords, and I think that applies to him. But I think he's a great communicator. He's certainly reaching a lot of people right now. He's written several books. Considering his behavior in the past that made him seem wild and not very smart, how he comes across now is much more intelligent. Whether he's doing his own show or whether he's being interviewed by other people, he comes across as thoughtful. And I think that he avoids the know-it-all energy. Now, he might say he doesn't care about his image and that sort of thing, but I think he probably does in a lot of ways with his ascendant in Capricorn and his sun here in Gemini on the South Node. I think he wants people to think of him as capable, intelligent, and intellectual. Where the sun in your chart is located is where you're going to shine in life. So with the sun in Gemini, communication, writing, speaking, languages, that's his area to shine. His sun is conjunct the South Node though, and so it's not always been an easy road for him to get support from others. And there's a lot of insecurity as well as far as believing in his abilities. I want to read the Sabian for his son. A world-famous pianist giving a concert performance. Talent, validations of social standing, working hard at being special or noticed. Success, practice makes perfect, having an adoring public. Cautions are relying on past success, not putting in the day-to-day practice. The need for applause and acclaim to validate one's existence, inflated egos demanding attention. Self-centeredness, probably in other lifetimes he didn't get the recognition that he deserved. And that could have created a sense of insecurity within him. And there likely was a desire for validation, judging by his past behaviors, and also from the things that we've talked about here in his chart. So he also has the sun in the 4th house. Heritage. Highly protective of private life and family, defensive, secure foundation, real estate, legacy, pride of ancestry, patriotism. Establishing a secure home situation for yourself and loved ones is very important to you. You are strongly connected to your home, property, and heritage. Yeah, I think that home life is important to him. I think he struggled when he was younger with his home life. Again, I don't know that much about him. I watched a video or two about him, so I'm just going by that. One of the things that is talked about is that when he was young, his mother had cancer. His mother has had cancer 3 times. Once when he was very small, I think once when he was a teenager, and once when he was an adult. But I think her having cancer when he was about 8 years old was a very traumatic experience for him. And that created, yes, insecurities, but also it plays into this Cancer energy, which can be like attachment to the mother and attachment to the home. The moon, which represents the mother, is opposing Pluto. Pluto can represent death. And so, even though his mother survived her bouts with cancer, has a child, this opposition likely describes his fear that he was going to lose her. And that could have been something that's carried over from a past life and having experiences of deep grief around mother or having insecure relationships with mother in other lifetimes. So even today, the way he talks about his mother suggests that she's still very important to him, where the relationship with his father was more difficult, and I believe he had an abusive stepfather. I think he struggled with having a secure foundation at home. I'm not sure that he had a traditional home identity, but I suspect that as he's transformed, he wants this for his family now. He's likely protective of his family, wanting to keep his children out of the spotlight. And maybe he has more of a traditional home. Now, patriotism, I think, is an interesting one for Russell Brand. Certainly, the fourth house in Cancer is the energy of patriotism. I would not describe him as a patriot, and yet, in a way, he is a patriot. I would say I wouldn't describe him as that because it seems like he doesn't have a lot of respect for the way Britain has handled certain things. I don't think he has a lot of respect for the people in the government of the country where he's from. But I think his patriotism comes out in, well, what I'm feeling is like that communication, sharing information, wanting to expose the negative so that the country where he's from can take a more positive role. I'm not sure that he even believes that government in any way can have a positive role in people's lives, but I think this is an area where he's in process. Everything in the world right now is in such flux that I think a lot of people wonder what will become of governments, what will become of countries in the future, as everything is in this state of evolution and we just don't know. Mercury in Gemini, wordsmith, inquisitive, learns fast, sarcastic, spontaneous, hyper, curious, sociable, talkative, too many interests, chaotic. Again, some keywords stand out when I think about him. Talkative, chaotic, sarcastic. Your capacity for learning and ability to absorb vast amounts of information is impressive, but also leads you to be a jack of all trades and master of none. I think the way to work with the Mercury and Gemini is to bring it down, bring the energy down, bring things into focus, which can be hard because there is some hyperactivity. I've heard him describe himself as being hyper and anxious. And when we have a overactive Mercury, that's the kind of energy that we find ourselves in. And yet, in many ways, he brings out the best here in his Mercury. As we've said already, he's great at communicating. He's written books. He does his own talk show. He comes across as very sociable, albeit a little bit unfocused and chaotic at times. Also, he's described himself as chaotic. His Mercury is in the fifth house of Leo. Vocally creative, engaging communicator, impersonator, actor, witty, prankster, talkative, lies easy, hides intentions. Falling in love radically changes your life as your lover becomes the muse of your creative expression. You love telling stories and making people laugh. Well, how fitting is this card? I think Kimberly really nailed the description on this one. She did on a lot of them, but I like this one a lot for Mercury in Leo, or the fifth house. I mean, for Brand, we're even talking about he is an actor, he is a comedian, he is an engaging communicator, he does impersonations. He needs to express his creativity with words, whether that's in spoken word or written word. This is where his gift lies. And whatever is in our fifth house is our gift. So not only is Mercury in his fifth house, but his fifth house cusp is in Gemini as well, which is ruled by Mercury. So this is like double Mercury energy. The Sabian symbol for his Mercury is three fledglings in a nest high up in a tree. Teaching, safety, privacy, staying in the nest versus leaving it, resisting change. Battle for survival, brothers and sisters, growing spirituality. Cautions are wanting to leave home before one's ready. Arguments about the pecking order, psychological immaturity, insecurity, codependence. I think this is a interesting one because of his Cancer and fourth house placements and that connection that he has to home. And so three fledglings in a nest is literally being at home, feeling safe at home. Now this is his Mercury, and I feel like him being creative with words is one of the things that makes him feel safe. It's a place where he feels comfortable and feels at home. Saturn in the sixth house. So Saturn in Cancer, an emotional island, feels emotionally unsafe and unsupported, craves emotional safety, can't open up, feelings are inconvenient or too complex, emotionally dependent on others. In order to uncover frozen emotions that have been stored in your body and create emotional safety, you must reconnect with your heart. Well, I remember when we were talking about the South Node, and the card was talking about having worked through the emotions in other lifetimes. I feel like part of that is the Saturn placement in Cancer made it difficult for him to work through his emotions. I don't feel like that was something that he had done in the past, but it's something that he needs to work on now. I feel whatever happened to him in his home life, he felt unsafe and unsupported. Now, this can be energy that's carried over. Saturn represents karma. Saturn also represents the father energy. And as I said a moment ago, I think he had a troubled relationship with his own father, and that his stepfather was abusive in some way. One of the dichotomies in his chart is his need to balance his mind and his heart. And now this inability to connect with the emotions. Yeah, I mean, he's got, again, there's dichotomies here. So in some ways, some of his aspects are like he's overly emotional. He doesn't really have good control over his emotions. And then we have this energy, which is like being shut down from the emotions. I did kind of tune into this before I came on, and what I got was that he does have obstacles to his emotions. Probably when he was younger, he was very impulsive with his emotions. And then as he got older and has a way to deal with that, as he disconnected more from them. And I think the drugs probably were part of that, not wanting to feel the emotions and to tune the emotions out. Saturn represents where we have fears. So being too emotional can be the fear for him. His Saturn's also in the 6th house. Needs a structured outer environment. Overwhelmed by chaos and disorder. Service-orientated, reluctant to have fun, critical, learns from mistakes or crises. Workaholic, anxious, never enough. Find balance between improving yourself and your environment and understanding that everything is a work in progress. Above all, let your light shine. Well, we've talked about hyperactivity. We've talked about being a bit chaotic. I think crisis is a lesson for him. He's got, Moon Mars opposing Pluto. To me, this speaks about having a lot of crisis in life. And how to counteract that is by having a very structured outer environment so that he doesn't feel overwhelmed by those things. Never enough. That plays into the insecurities, and we've mentioned that he's even said himself that he suffers from anxiety. So you can see I have a few asteroids in here. One of those asteroids is karma. Obviously, we don't have a card for karma because cards don't relate to asteroids. But I wanted to read the Sabian, which is a meeting of a study group or literary society. Keywords: shared higher knowledge, print media, the written word, criticism and critics, newspapers and news media, talk radio, sharing beliefs and ideas, the mirrors of society, discussions, letters to the editor, the meeting of the minds. The caution: falsifying of ideas, propaganda spread by the media, excluding anything non-establishment, disinformation. Very interesting Sabian symbol to have here for his karma. Certainly seems like he has past life experience in what he's chosen for himself in this lifetime. You can see that I have the asteroid Lie here too, and the asteroid Lie is conjunct Saturn. Saturn is authority figures, and so that can represent that one of his missions is to expose the lie of authority figures. Now, authority figures can be governments, right? And Saturn represents structure, including the structure of governments. Venus in Cancer, sentimental, domestic, inspires trust, nurturing, homebody, overprotective, loves spending time with friends and family. Everything that you love and makes you feel loved is at home, which you fill with harmony and visually appealing things. Home is truly where your heart is. Yeah, well, I think judging by his chart, that's true. Home is where the heart is. When anyone has a lot of Cancer energy or 4th house energy or moon energy, the home becomes the safe place, the place where there is security and comfort. Venus often describes what a man would be attractive to in a woman. And so one would think that he would be attracted to a woman that is traditional, wanting to be a homemaker, someone that has a nicely presented home, someone that has a very feminine figure, someone that's very soft-spoken and gentle, someone very nurturing, and someone that wants to be a mother. Doesn't exactly fit his first wife, but I don't know about the second. Venus in the 6th house, dedicated, supportive, dependent, affectionate, demanding, worrier, gives too much, acts of service, craves appreciation, artsy. Although unlikely to give flashy gifts, you show your love through acts of service. You deeply appreciate the little things others take for granted. One would suspect that his love language is acts of service with this Venus placement. I feel like his Venus here actually speaks towards the broader, more collective energy and not just about romantic relationships, but yeah, he's bringing this dedication to the collective to be of service in his own way, whether you like and appreciate what he's choosing to do for service or not. In his mind, bringing information to the public is being of service. And we mentioned how the Cancer and the fourth house energy can relate to the soul group. So that's why I'm saying, like, this Venus here can be like, I'm being of service to my soul group. And he's very dedicated to that. And we've seen, like, even through these allegations and the demonetization of his channel, he could have went away. He could have went and hid himself from the public eye, but instead he's kept going and he's continued to make videos. So in that sense, he's dedicated. And remember, Pluto is conjunct his ascendant, which means Pluto is opposing this Venus. One of the things we can say about Pluto is it can represent the plutocracy, especially when it's in Capricorn. And that can be representing the struggle between the elites or the authority figures and what he feels is his service that he's trying to achieve by spreading this communication. The Sabian symbol for Venus is an Indian girl introduces her college boyfriend to her assembled tribe, challenging or going against the status quo, bringing in a new, more intellectual element or bringing in a more natural, earth-based attitude, revealing strange foreign situations or truth to others, accepting people without judgment, being welcoming and loving, cautions, unconventional or alternative behavior, hidden motives, people misunderstanding each other, rebellion for the sake of being different. Well, this connection to rebellion is interesting because Venus squares Uranus. This is part of that grand cross that I talked about. So, with Uranus aspecting Venus and Uranus being in Libra, Pluto being in Libra, on a past life level, and probably in this lifetime too, because patterns repeat, there's been a lot of trauma around abandonment, betrayal, being too codependent with people, being let down. I mean, of course, we have Chiron involved here, so this is a wound. Chiron conjunct Venus is I have been hurt before. And when we have, like, he's got this cross here, Uranus, Chiron, and Venus, sometimes that Uranus can make the Venus a bit cold because there's hurt, there's abandonment, and so I'm going to shut down. Let's wait till we get to the Uranus card and we'll talk more about this. Venus is conjunct his seventh house cusp of relationships, which is again helping him become more attuned to relationships and also wanting to be of service to other people. Remember what I said, he is trying to balance being self centered with now bringing people together, forging relationships. He can't do it alone anymore. With what he's chosen to be his mission, his soul mission, he needs to learn how to bring people together. Venus is also conjunct the asteroid Truth. So, is there a desire to bring the truth? I think the desire's there. Whether you feel he's bringing the truth or not is going to be your own opinion. And then we have to ask the question, what is truth? And what truth exactly is being represented here? Pluto in Libra, challenge to transform relationships. Vacillates between codependency and detachment, feels inadequate, closets emotions, prioritizes the feelings and opinions of others, tries to find the self in partnerships. Focus on yourself first. Choose a partner who brings out the best version of you to create relationship balance and help you overcome your tendency to be the co-pilot. These placements of Pluto and Uranus suggest that he's had negative experience with relationships in the past. We have to remember too that Pluto and Uranus in Libra is a generational aspect. So a whole generation of people have these placements. And so the house tends to become more of the focus. I think the first line of this card, vacillates between codependency and detachment, is really describes what he's going through because he has so many planets in Aries. And those planets in Aries are going to make him have that I want what I want energy. Only he has to learn to find balance with other people. As I said, this is his soul's purpose. He does bring the ability to be open to other people that have different opinions than him. You know, he brings on people like Candace Owens, for example, and he can have a conversation with her. Maybe some more conservative people like Ron DeSantis, for instance. He's willing to listen to what other people have to say, even if maybe he doesn't agree with them 100%, which is what the world needs more of. Pluto in the 8th house of Scorpio, merging with others for soul evolution. Find and understand the boundaries of self, intimacy, taboo experiences. Explores the psychology of power and control, deep thinker. Your soul evolutionary path is to grow into something beyond yourself and to plumb the depths of the human experience through many intense emotional experiences. Balance between the heart and the mind, the emotional self and the mental self, definitely is another focus for him. Again, relationships are important. Now, his Pluto is in the 8th house. That is Scorpio's house. So, some of that, like I said earlier, is like the sex addiction, taboo experiences, maybe being interested in kink could be the more negative ways that can play out. I mean, depending on your perspective. Some people might not think like that. But part of the draw to that for him is likely to be a subconscious search for intimacy and a subconscious search to feel safe, letting his emotions be seen by his partner. That's not easy for him because of his South Node and Cancer energy. For him, finding balance in relationships in terms of a balance of power is also going to be important. Whenever we're dealing with Pluto and Scorpio, we're dealing with a balanced relationship with power, not being manipulative over other people and not being subservient to other people. Uranus and Libra, unpredictable and fractured relationship patterns. High expectations, chronically single, wants lover has friend. Won't take orders, detached or overattached, feels unsafe, eccentric liaisons, looking for the exit. Past or current life abandonment requires healing around the idea of what partnership means and what is a healthy level of involvement and expectations. I think that card kind of says it all. Yeah, he's had unpredictable and fractured relationships in the past, whether this lifetime or other lifetimes. He doesn't feel safe, looking for an exit. I mean, this is kind of the key when Uranus is in Libra or Uranus is an aspect to Venus, like his is. when you have Uranus square Venus, you're a person that may really long for a relationship, yet you can never settle down in a relationship. You may approach relationships too mental. You may be like, oh, now I'm bored, or you're too detached. Part of that can be because you've been wounded, you don't want to attach. And this can be a pattern that can be deeply subconscious in people, and they don't even realize that they're pushing people away or they're choosing people that are inappropriate for them. Maybe people that are unavailable, people that are married, people that are distant, meaning like locationally distant, someone that travels all the time. Fears of settling down with one person. I would say, though, wanting your lover to be your friend is something that would be important to someone with that placement. Uranus in the eighth house. Past life memories of abandonment, internal insecurity, poor boundaries, betrayed, accepts abuse, eccentric sex, multiple transformations. Your psychoanalysis skills can uncover betrayal, but the secret to feeling safe is in developing internal security within yourself instead of reaching outside for stability. That's what we've talked about with the South Node in Cancer. Needing to find inner security. I absolutely feel like past life abandonment is an issue here, and there's a deep wounding from some sort of abandonment and betrayal. Also, having Uranus square his ascendant shows that he wants to be different, he wants to be an individual, he wants to challenge the status quo. He's not someone that wants to conform, he's someone that's more revolutionary. I do want to mention his Sabian for Uranus, which is mankind's vast, enduring effort to reach for knowledge transferable from generation to generation. I feel like this is where his knowledge really shines. Now, Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, and Uranus connects us with our higher guidance. So, Mercury is like knowledge, and Uranus is our wisdom. Wisdom comes from our soul. Knowledge comes from what we learn, but this is beyond that. So I feel like speaking to his what appears to be his soul mission, he's here to transfer this knowledge to us, and therefore he's playing a very important role for his soul group and for humanity. But he's striving to reach for this knowledge, and I don't think he's reached it yet. He's transformed a lot in the past decade, and he's embodied more spiritual qualities. Like all of us, he's still awakening, and I don't think he's broken through enough of his patterns to be fully tuned into this yet. But we are in a major transition right now, and that might happen soon. And as I said, these accusations might be the impetus of him really coming into his own and having to leave aspects of his mind behind in order to basically channel this higher information. Keywords: interpreting and conveying beliefs and ideas, the desire to pass on something to others, knowledge being changed, modified, or updated, wisdom of the ancestors, researching history, striving for answers, the gift of knowledge. Cautions: being a know-it-all, information, knowledge, or riches inherited by only the select few, fundamentalism, doing what's always been done regardless of the reason. I think this Sabian fits his personality very well. I want to mention the Sabian for his North Node too. I should have mentioned it earlier, but I forgot, and it's an interesting one. Retired Army veterans gather to reawaken old memories. This Sabian is an image of a gathering or reunion of people who have shared some kind of companionship, struggle, or history. Gathering together can unite old feelings of camaraderie and great passion. Even among people who they may not remember or know well, this can invoke many emotions, all the way from sadness to laughter to amazement. Why I find this interesting is because I suspect that he was in an army, a soldier, even possibly a commander or high up, like leader, general in an army at some point in his life. I mean, Mars conjunct Jupiter in Aries speaks to that for me. Can also be part of this wounding and trauma that he's experienced. And it could be why he feels very dedicated to change. He may have been a very revolutionary soldier, and he's bringing that back again, the desire to be a revolutionary. Although I think that his attitude now is very anti-war. That could be because he suffered because of war in other lifetimes. I'm not saying that he knows this on a conscious level. I'm talking about subconsciously or as part of his soul's journey. Keywords are masculine domains, moratoriums and calls for peace, prisoners of war, memorials to war, bringing up painful memories in the hope of sharing understanding and healing. Neptune in the 10th house, dissolving the structure of the ego. Life of healing or service craves inspirational occupation, visionary, self-sacrificing, idealistic expectations. You will find the greatest meaning in life as you aid society with compassion and self-sacrifice, which ultimately leads to the dissolution of the ego. And this is the transformation that we've seen him going through. It's the dissolving of the structure of ego as he's become more spiritual. Now he has Neptune on his north node. This is part of his life path. Neptune has played a significant role in his life. There can be a lot of depression and insecurity with Neptune energy. There can be a lack of understanding who one really is. The interesting things with Neptune is that it dissolves the boundaries between things. That makes people very sensitive, makes people empathic. They don't know where they stop and other people start. It's hard for them to create appropriate boundaries. This is something we've seen and talked about in him. Neptune rules acting. It rules acting because it's able to create illusions. Acting, plays, movies, you're creating a temporary illusion for people. He's able to take on a character. Sometimes, though, people that aren't actors, that have strong Neptune influence, they take on characters. They take on characters related to people's expectations of them. Again, they don't have a good idea of who they are necessarily. Not having necessarily a good idea of who one is, being sensitive to pain, perhaps being empathic and picking up other people's emotions can lead one to drug addiction, sex addiction, all kinds of addictions, food addictions, and Brand has said that he was a bulimic in his early life. But we want to turn that energy around, and we want to instead bring forth the spiritual energy, the transcendent energy. We can use that sensitivity to tune into the collective, and I'm sure even if it's on a subconscious level, he does. Some would say that's good instinct to know what people like when it's tuning into the collective. People that have strong Neptune, that are creative, and that become very successful as creatives, is because they tune into the collective and they understand what people want or what people can relate to, what brings out people's emotions. And I think we see that Russell has these qualities. But the key to his true success in life is going to be letting go of the ego. Neptune in Sagittarius, in pursuit of spiritual discovery, spiritually developed, chaotic education, indecisive, unwavering faith things will get better, immersive spiritual experimentation. You have a strong predilection to convert others to your spiritual way of thinking, but it's important to allow them to find and follow their own path of enlightenment. I think what he's looking for, and maybe what's been missing, at least until recently, has been the meaning of life, a spiritual meaning of life. Again, when we don't have a strong sense of faith, that makes it easy to turn to those kinds of addictions to satisfy an emptiness that we feel within ourselves. And I think that him finding spirituality, meditation, is what helped him change and is giving him direction in his life. As I said, this is definitely part of his path. And he does it in a way in which it's not, he shares things. He's done meditations, for example. He's talked about meditations. He's had great spiritual teachers on his show, but he's not being a fundamentalist. He's not saying everyone has to follow this type of spirituality. One thing he may still have to work on is an unwavering faith that things will get better. He may believe this, but just in my own interpretation of what I hear him say is sometimes seems like he has a very pessimistic attitude, that it's impossible for things to change, and that we need a quite radical change to make any sort of difference. So I'm not sure that my interpretation of what he's saying is what he means, but that's what I take away from it. So the Sabian symbol for his Neptune is one of the most esoteric Sabians. In the left section of an archaic temple, a lamp burns in a container shaped like a human body, connecting the left and right sides. That's an interesting statement for the key words here, because obviously I think it's talking about the left and right sides of the body. But I think in his own way, his intention is to bridge the differences between the left and the right politically. The left, too, this Sabian talks about the left section of an archaic temple. The left represents the feminine, and so part of this, I feel, for him is integrating the feminine energy and connecting with his heart. Other keywords: yoga, which he practices, grounding reality, sexuality, realizing the body is the same as spirit, light workers, acceptance of the body and its functions. Cautions: worshiping the body at the expense of the intellect, psyche, or spirit. Concentrating exclusively on physical desires and needs. Being caught up in the illusion of the body and the physical self. Once again, when he was younger, very much acting out the cautions of the Sabian, because he was focused on the physical body, the material world, seeking the pleasures of the flesh, if you will, whether that was drugs, alcohol, sex, food. We see him moving more on his soul path as he's transmuted that to a large extent, and he's focusing on the inner qualities, the qualities that transcend physical embodiment, and moving through the ego in the mind. So the deck that I'm using in this reading is the Astro Persona deck. This is a Intuit Oracle deck, and it was developed by Kimberly Aria, and I was lucky enough to get an advance copy to work with and see how I liked it, and that's why I'm presenting this reading to you. This deck is on Kickstarter right now, and I'm going to put the link to the Kickstarter below if you would like to support it. As you can see, if you're learning astrology, this is an amazing tool. You can draw someone's chart and you can pull the cards and you can begin to understand what each of the planets and signs and houses mean. If you work with it enough, it's going to teach you astrology. Even if you're more advanced with astrology, I think that it can still help you by giving you ideas through using the key words, for example. And if you're an astrologer, what's great about it is you can pull the cards and you can take a picture of that and you can give that to your clients so that they can have visuals about each of their placements for when they go back and they're listening or they're looking at their chart, and it can help them understand their own chart. So we've used the cards today to go over the planets and the signs and the houses, which is really how this deck is set up. It has 132 cards, has the suns in every sign and house, moon in every sign and house, all the rising signs, all the planets, etc. The North and South Node cards come as a bonus when you buy the expansion pack. But I want to show you a little bit further with this deck that the deck can also teach you how to understand some of the aspects. So we're going to use some of the cards to look at some of Brand's aspects. So he has, for example, Mercury trine Uranus. So what you would look for is Mercury in the 11th house or Mercury in Aquarius, because the Aquarius in 11th house is the same as Uranus. Uranus is the ruler. And so we have unorthodox ideas. You can talk about anything to anyone and have 10 ideas to their one. Vast vision, ambition, and problem solving bring success, but focus is challenging for you. Especially when Mercury, we've talked about how Mercury can bring hyperactivity and anxiety. That's especially true when it's an aspect to Uranus. But definitely unorthodox ideas fits here. I think he has a lot of vision, and I don't think we've seen the full expression of his vision yet. And he's definitely seeks new ways to do things. As I've said in the reading, he's a revolutionary. It's possible that his soul path is to really expand that revolutionary quality, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out. But depending on how the timelines continue to shift, we may find that there is some form of revolution. Could he become some type of leader within some kind of cultural or political revolution? I think he already is that, and I think there's opportunity for him to expand that. We mentioned how he was likely a soldier in another lifetime, and I think those qualities are still in there. I don't think that he wants to take a violent route at all, but I think he enjoys fighting for a cause. And I think he likes to root for the underdog. And in that sense, he has the ability to inspire people with revolutionary ideas. Personally, I don't always agree with everything he says. Sometimes he's a bit too anarchistic for my liking, but there's other people that, resonate with that style. So he's got Moon opposed Pluto. So what we could look at is Moon in the 8th house, Moon in Scorpio, in order to understand a little bit about the Moon opposed Pluto. Loves all with their heart and soul. Hypnotic, magnetic, pushes limits, deep attachments, complex, possessive, puzzling contradictions, intense, deep, handles money well. You give of yourself wholeheartedly, but desire for deep connection. Plus, an untrusting nature makes it hard to find and hold satisfying relationships. Yeah, we talked about that earlier, how I feel from his chart. He really wants to have a deep, intimate connection, but he's got some wounding that makes that difficult. And part of that is difficulty trusting. We talked about Venus square Uranus. So if we wanted to pull a card about that, we could look up Venus in the 11th or Venus in Aquarius, similar to what we did with Mercury, to understand how Venus relates with that Uranian energy. This card is called Variety. Loves groups, diplomatic, charming, curious about people, harmonious friendships, loves a party, inspiring conversations. Your lover must share your interests, get along with your friends, offer new subjects of conversation, and be involved in the same causes, or you'll walk away. Well, one thing here is Uranus, there's a desire for variety. We talked about this a little bit, like not necessarily wanting to commit right away, tendency to maybe be a bit of a player. There can be unusual qualities in the relationships. For example, being attracted to someone with a big age difference than you. There's definitely a curiosity about people, and that's part of the desire to have variety. This could translate not just to relationships, but just a desire to have a lot of friends and to be very curious about people, to want to talk to a lot of different people. It makes sense again with what he does because, as I said earlier, he's willing to have people on that are different than him and be open to discussing their differences. So he has Pluto opposing Mars. So we would look at Pluto in the first house or Pluto in Aries. Exploration of the freedom of self. A thirst for freedom and self-discovery makes long-term partnerships hard for you to maintain, but relationships bring important insights and a true reflection of yourself. He has Saturn square Jupiter. Discover your own personal truth. He also has Saturn square Jupiter. So we would look at Saturn in the 9th house or Saturn in Sagittarius. And vice versa, Jupiter in Capricorn and Jupiter in the 10th house. So first, we have discover your own personal truth. Your security is shaken if you find that the truth you were taught is flawed or incomplete, but your life path is to lock into your own inner knowing. Certainly a big part of his soul's growth is to find this truth. For Jupiter in Capricorn, natural leader. You are successful and dependable in your career. In positions of leadership you hold, you are admired, respected, and appreciated by those that know you. So his sun opposes Neptune. So we would look at sun in the 12th house or sun in Pisces. True believer. You are the eternal optimist and will rise above even the most difficult circumstances. Although you are well loved, you feel few understand you. Deeply compassionate, gentle, friendly, escapist, beloved by others, mystical, hard on oneself, avoids the spotlight. So, as to these accusations, I did pull a few cards. So the first question I asked was, did Russell Brand assault or rape those women? And I got this card, Ostrich Trap. Avoidance, refuses to face reality, fear-based thinking, just a conspiracy theory? I kind of took this card. Well, what I saw in this card is it could be that there's a refusal to face reality about this situation, or that it's a conspiracy theory. So I asked that question and I got the card roadblock. I took this to mean that it is part of a conspiracy theory because I feel the roadblock is they're trying to block him. I asked, are they trying to block him? And I got the Anamkara, which I feel is, in a way, yes, they're trying to block him, but it's a lesson for him. And there's probably a lesson for all of us in watching this play out, in that it's part of leading us to unconditional love. I asked, will he get convicted of a crime? And I get magnifying glass. And so I feel that we need more information. The evidence hasn't been released. The evidence is being gathered. One of the things that I find questionable is that the media is actively searching for people. So I read that the media had put out a call to all the people that went to Brand's high school to ask people to come forward if they had been assaulted by him. In the same way, I read an article, I think it was in the Times, and at the end of the article, it said, if you have information or have been assaulted by Brand, please contact us at this phone number. I mean, you're just asking for people to come forth and make up information. Now, I'm not saying that the women that are accusing him made up that information. I'm only saying that it's questionable to actively put out these calls for people. But still, it seems like we have not seen all the information. Certainly, there's been no trial and there's been no presentation of the evidence. I asked what's not being seen based on the magnifying glass card, and I got yarn. So yarn is like complicated. Something's complicated, something's tangled. It's like this yarn has to be untangled in order to give us clarity. I asked if they were trying to silence him, and I got yarn, which is, I'm basically using two decks, the Zodiac 108 and the Intuit Oracle, and they each have a yarn card. So that card came out from both decks, yarn. Again, there's something complicated. Things are interconnected. Things need to be worked out. It's like Spirit doesn't want to give me the information right now because, well, things could change. The timelines could change between now and when the evidence is presented to us. I asked, how would people react if he was convicted? The first card I got was Wheel of Karma, and I asked for a clarifier and I got Old Car. And I feel like there's two takes. That's why I asked for a clarifier for Wheel of Karma, because some people might be like, if he gets convicted, some people will be like, well, he got his just karma. One of the key words on here, though, is blind justice. And I feel like there's going to be a segment of people that don't believe that the justice is blind and that there's something underhanded going on. Rise and fall is one of the key words here. I mentioned earlier how we don't know if a conviction, what effect would that have on his reputation. As a clarifier, I pulled Old Car, which is like something stuck. And I feel like there's going to be a segment of the population that just feels that they don't get any justice, that everything is stuck. I think there's a potential for people to feel very frustrated. If people feel that the evidence shows that this is conspiratorial, then there could be this feeling of everything's stuck and people get angry about it. I think it's all going to depend on the evidence that's presented and how it's presented. And then I asked, has he been redeemed? So going back to what I talked about at the beginning, and is it possible for people to change, to redeem themselves from a very negative past? And these two cards came out together. Pluto has the Phoenix, rebirth, transformation, awakening, change. You know, the Phoenix burns its old self up and rises from the ashes. So for me, this card right here is enough to be yes, he has transformed himself in a very major way that can be seen as at least attempting to redeem himself. But also the constellation card came out, which to me is higher consciousness, being connected to something bigger than ourselves, source energy. I'm looking at this card and I'm getting like we are all stars. We are all our own galaxy. And who we are on Earth is only a small fraction of who we truly are. And we're all working on embodying that higher part of us, including Russell Brand. Love him or hate him, he has transformed himself, and he will continue to transform himself. And it's yet to be determined exactly how this will play out. But personally, looking at his astrology chart, I do feel like this will only cause a much greater transformation than we've seen already. And I'm very interested to see what that looks like on the other side. If you're interested in supporting the Astro Persona deck on Kickstarter, I'm going to link it below. I really hope you go and check it out. And it will be offered at the best price now through the Kickstarter. I hope that you enjoyed this look into Russell Brand's chart. Let me know in the comments what you think about him, what you think about the accusations. Let me know if you like this type of reading. Would you like me to do more of them? Would you like me to talk more on this? Would you like to take a look at the transits that are happening? For example, around the accusations. Would you like to take a look at the asteroids in his chart? Let me know below. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want a personal astrology reading with me, tarot reading, QHHT session, I'll link my website below. Thank you all for tuning in, and I'll speak to you soon.